You're going to apologize to him, she said, arms crossed, lips pressed so tightly they were barely there. I thought she was joking. I actually laughed. A dry, awkward chuckle like someone being dared to jump off a cliff and handed a parachute made of paper towels. But her expression didn't move. I'm serious, Callum, she added, voice shaking. Not with fear, not with sadness, but with that dangerous blend of disgust and conviction I hadn't seen on her face since her mother's funeral. You were rude. You embarrassed me in front of my entire team. He was trying to help. Help? He spilled red wine on my chest. He called my job blue-collar romantic. He said, and I quote, "It's cute how you still bring her lunch. Like old-school chivalry or whatever." And somehow, I was the one who needed to apologize? Let me back up. No, actually, let me not back up. You don't need the whole marriage backstory. You don't need to know what I do for work or how long we've been together. You just need to understand that at that moment, standing in our hallway under a dim bulb that buzzed whenever the AC kicked in, my wife looked at me like he mattered more. And that's when I knew something was wrong. No, not new. New is too soft. I felt it. In my gut. The kind of knowing that sinks like a brick in your stomach while your face keeps pretending everything's fine. I stared at her. She stared back. I said, "Why are you protecting him?" She didn't flinch. "Because you overreacted." He put his hand on your lower back while I was sitting right there. He's European. That's how they are. He winked at you. She rolled her eyes. God, you're so dramatic. And there it was. Not, "I love you." Not, "I'm sorry." Just a sentence that hit harder than a slap. I was dramatic. Because I didn't like how another man talked about my marriage like it was a 90s sitcom he didn't believe in. Because I refused to play the quiet, supportive husband while she entertained compliments from a guy who looked like he moisturized with arrogance. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to her, listening to her breathing, counting the seconds between each one. I turned my back to her when she shifted closer. She didn't notice. The next day, she texted me from work. "Did you think about what I said?" Then, "It would really mean a lot if you could apologize." For me. She wanted peace. I wanted the truth. And I was about to get it, but not the way I expected. Because what happened next started with a forgotten phone, a group message, and a photo that never should have been taken. And after that, the words I said didn't just break the peace. They blew it all to hell. The next morning started too quietly. No humming from the bathroom. No clatter of makeup brushes. No cheerful, fake, "have a good day" that she usually tossed over her shoulder before leaving. Just silence. When I walked into the kitchen, her coffee mug was half empty, lipstick smudged on the rim, and her phone, of all things, was sitting right there on the counter. I froze. My wife never forgot her phone. Ever. That thing was practically glued to her hand. She'd check it mid-conversation, mid-dinner, mid-argument. Once, she answered a Slack notification during a movie and said, "It's just work, don't be jealous." So yeah, seeing it abandoned was like finding a loaded gun on a church pew. I didn't touch it at first. I swear I didn't. I poured myself some stale coffee, stared out the window, tried to act like I wasn't thinking about it. But the longer I stood there, the louder it screamed in my head. What if this was a test? What if she left it there on purpose to see if I'd snoop? I almost laughed at the thought, like I had the energy to play her little psychological games before sunrise. I sat down, rubbed my temples, and that's when it lit up. The screen flashed a preview, a group message titled Team Beamers. That was her office chat. The name always made me cringe, like some college clique that thought they ran the world. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But my eyes caught something before my hands could stop them. It wasn't even a full message, just the tail end of one. "Can't believe he made her cry like that." My stomach dropped. Cry? Who? Her? About what? I tapped the screen, and it opened. No password. I swear I didn't hack anything. It was already unlocked. I just scrolled. Logan's name was everywhere. Every other message, some kind of inside joke or "you're the best" reaction from her. Then one that stopped my heart cold. "Don't let Callum get to you. He's just insecure." That was from her. My wife. Defending him. In front of everyone. Then Logan replied, "You deserve better than someone who doesn't get what you do for people." My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. My breath came out in uneven bursts. The rest of the chat was coworkers tossing in emojis, half-hearted reactions, fake concern. One message from a woman named Dana. Maybe Callum needs therapy, lol. Geneva laughed in reaction. A little yellow laughing face right there on the screen. It wasn't an affair message. Not directly. No, I love you. No, let's meet. But it was worse somehow. More humiliating. They were turning me into a story. A character. A punchline. When she came home that evening, she noticed her phone was moved a few inches and froze for just a second. Just 1 second, but enough for me to catch it. I didn't say anything. Not then. I let her cook dinner like nothing happened, humming to herself, pretending the air between us wasn't thick enough to choke on. At dinner, she talked about her team dinner plans for Friday. Apparently, Logan would be there, too. You don't mind, right? She asked casually, like someone asking if I wanted ketchup. I said no, of course not. My voice sounded foreign to me. Too calm. She smiled. Good. I didn't want another scene. Another scene. Like I was some unstable child she had to manage. After she went to bed, I sat in the dark, replaying every conversation we'd ever had about her work. I realized she'd stopped calling me honey. She'd started saying my name more often, like she was keeping emotional distance. I noticed how she always angled her phone screen away when we sat together. How she'd laugh at messages then sigh when I asked what was funny. It all started making sense. But I wasn't ready to explode. Not yet. I wanted to be smart about it this time. Precise. Because I wasn't just a jealous husband anymore. I was a man with evidence. And Friday night, I planned to use it. Only I didn't know then that I'd be the one apologizing again. And that apology would be the last straw before everything finally shattered. Friday came too fast. She was in a good mood that morning. Too good. She wore her favorite dress, the one with the tiny silver clasp at the neck and the cut that made strangers turn their heads. She hummed while curling her hair in the hallway mirror and asked if I wanted to meet them at the restaurant or just let her go solo. That was how she phrased it. Not would you like to come? Not even do you feel up to it? Just a reminder that she had options, like my presence was a variable in her night, not a constant. I'll be there, I said. No hesitation. No question. I wanted her to know I was watching. She blinked once, then forced a smile. Great. It's at Olive and Vine. 8 o'clock. Don't be late this time. I wasn't late. In fact, I got there 20 minutes early and asked the host if I could sit nearby, but not with their table. I told him it was a surprise thing, and I guess he bought it. He put me just behind a tall planter near the back of the restaurant, a perfect view of the round table for 6 they had reserved. I sat there and waited. And waited. My palms were sweaty. My heart raced every time the door opened. I must have looked crazy, sipping water like a prisoner waiting for sentencing. But then they came in. Geneva walked in first, radiant, her laugh a little too loud. Logan was right behind her, and he had the nerve to touch her lower back again, just like he did at that last event. 2 more colleagues followed, then another guy I didn't recognize. They all sat down, ordered wine, and I watched them from my post in silence. My jaw clenched so tight, I felt a pop in my neck. Geneva never even looked at her phone to check if I was coming. She just started the night without me. I was invisible to her. And for once, that worked in my favor. 10 minutes in, Logan said something that made everyone erupt into laughter. Geneva leaned toward him, placing her hand lightly on his arm. I saw the server bring out appetizers. A bottle of red wine followed. I watched her take a sip, tilt her head back, and laugh again like nothing in the world could bother her. And then she spoke, loud enough that even I could hear across the room. Callum thinks Logan flirts with me, she said between chuckles. Can you believe that? He said he saw him wink at me. I told him it's just insecurity. He thinks every guy who's nice to me is trying to steal me away. The entire table laughed again. Even Logan. Especially Logan. That's when I stood up. I didn't even remember pushing the chair back. It just happened. I walked over to their table slowly, like the floor had turned to ice. Geneva saw me when I was halfway there. Her smile faltered. Her hand froze midair as she reached for her glass. Logan turned too, and the look on his face? That smug little twitch at the corner of his mouth. That did it. Don't stop the story on my account, I said calmly, standing behind Geneva's chair. What part are we at? The he's just a friend part? Or the part where the husband shows up uninvited and ruins the mood? Silence. Geneva's friends turned to one another, some coughing awkwardly, others suddenly very interested in their menus. Logan had the audacity to grin. Hey, Callum. Didn't know you were joining us. Clearly, I said, staring straight at Geneva. I didn't realize I needed to RSVP to hear my marriage become entertainment. She stood up then, grabbing my arm. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath. "What am I doing?" I repeated, louder. "I'm showing up. Because apparently that's a problem now." "Not here," she begged. "Please. This is not the place." "Oh, I agree," I nodded. "It should have been our living room. Maybe after you explained why you're texting your coworkers that your husband's just insecure, instead of asking why another man touches you like he owns you." Geneva's face turned pale. Logan finally stood up too, stepping slightly in front of her like he was defending her from me. "You need to calm down, man." That's when I said it. The words that ended everything. I looked at Logan, then at her, then at the rest of their smug little team. I spoke clearly, so every single one of them could hear it. No yelling, no cursing, just quiet, measured devastation. You know what the saddest part is? I used to admire her. I used to brag about her. Now, I watch her laugh at me behind my back with a man who can't even respect a marriage enough to sit one seat farther away. I turned to Geneva. "I'll send you the lawyer's contact Monday. You can keep your wine, your jokes, your coworkers. I'm done being the punchline." And I left. I didn't look back, but I heard her voice tremble behind me. Not shouting, just barely loud enough to catch. "Callum, wait. Please." I didn't. Because the moment she laughed at my pain, that's when I stopped being her husband. I didn't go home that night. I drove aimlessly for hours. Just me and the low hum of the engine and the echo of my own words bouncing around inside my skull. I replayed her laugh, that casual, dismissive tone when she threw me under the bus like I was just some fragile relic she'd outgrown. I tried to imagine how long it had been like that. How many times she'd used me as a convenient joke or a cautionary tale when she wanted to prove how strong or independent she was to people who didn't know me. Or worse, to people who did. At 2:37 a.m., I parked outside my buddy Wesley's place and just sat in the car, staring at the dark windows. He's the kind of friend you don't need to explain anything to. I hadn't called him in months. We lived different lives. But when I texted him "you up?" he replied within 30 seconds. "Doors unlocked. Couch is yours." I crashed there for 2 nights. I didn't turn on my phone. I didn't check her messages. I didn't care. I knew Geneva would spin the story the second I walked out of that restaurant. Maybe tell her team I was unstable, that I overreacted, that I made a fool of myself. That's what people do when they're caught. They rewrite history to survive it. When I finally turned my phone on Sunday morning, I had 19 missed calls from her. For voicemails. 3 from an unknown number, her mother's landline, probably. And then a text that made me sit up and read it twice. "Can we talk?" I told Logan not to come around anymore. I stared at the message. That was it. That was her grand peace offering. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "You were right." She didn't say, "I understand now." She said she told Logan not to come around anymore, as if she was doing me a favor, like cutting off the guy who'd been flirting with her for months after everything imploded somehow, made her a victim of circumstance. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove home around 2 p.m., half hoping she wouldn't be there. But of course she was, sitting on the living room couch, like a student waiting to explain a failed exam. The house was too clean, like she'd spent the weekend vacuuming away her guilt. As soon as I walked in, she stood up. "Callum, thank God. Please, just let me say something." I dropped my keys on the table and crossed my arms. She wrung her hands. "I should have never let it get that far. I didn't mean to humiliate you. I was just trying to be strong, you know? In front of them. I didn't realize how bad it looked until you said those things. You caught me off guard." Off guard. That's what I was to her. An interruption. A glitch in her curated image. "You weren't trying to be strong," I said. "You were trying to be admired. There's a difference." Her eyes welled up. "That's not fair." I raised my voice just slightly. "What's not fair is being the man who brings your lunch while someone else gets your attention, your laughter, your respect." She wiped her face. "He doesn't mean anything to me." You defended him. In front of everyone. Even after he disrespected me. And what did you say about me? That I was insecure? I pulled out my phone, opened the group chat screenshots I'd taken before she wiped the messages. Yes, I knew she would, and showed them to her. "You laughed when your coworker said I need therapy." She looked at the screen, face crumbling. "I didn't mean it like that. But you meant it enough to react. You meant it enough to let them keep going." I stepped back and leaned against the wall. You wanted their approval so badly you sold me for applause. Geneva didn't speak. She just stood there with her hands trembling, mascara smudged under her eyes, finally realizing the depth of what she'd done. Not just the embarrassment, but the betrayal. Not a betrayal of the body, but one of dignity, of loyalty. That's the kind of cheating no one talks about, the emotional kind. The kind that leaves no lipstick stains, no hotel receipts, just a slowly eroded sense of self-worth. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. You don't, I said. Because I don't know if I want it fixed. She collapsed back onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I turned to go upstairs. But just as my foot hit the first step, she called out, voice barely audible. There's something else I need to tell you. Something you don't know. I stopped cold. Because the way she said it, so quiet, so broken, it didn't sound like a confession. It sounded like a warning. And in that moment, I realized I might have only scratched the surface. I didn't turn around right away. I stood on that first step for a solid 10 seconds, my hand resting on the railing, the air behind me growing heavier with each breath she took. Something in her voice, flat but trembling, hollow like a cracked glass, told me I wasn't ready for whatever came next. I'd walked into that living room expecting to argue, to maybe say some things I couldn't take back, but not this. Not some late-game twist whispered like a confession in a confessional. When I finally turned, Geneva was no longer crying. She looked drained. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her fingers were twisted together in a nervous knot on her lap. Whatever she was about to say wasn't rehearsed. She wasn't calculating. She was terrified. You've been focused on Logan, she said slowly, as if every word was made of glass. And I understand why. But this started long before him. My mind went still. I didn't sit. I didn't speak. I just stared. Geneva swallowed hard. 6 months ago, I thought I was going to be laid off. My team was downsizing. I was on the chopping block, and I panicked. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to scare you while you were still dealing with your uncle's death and the house stuff. What house stuff? I asked, the words automatic. She blinked. The leak in the basement, the insurance, Callum, it doesn't matter. What matters is, I started staying late to look useful. I took extra projects, ran meetings, volunteered for everything. And that's how I met him. My chest tightened. Logan. No, she said. Her voice cracked. Not Logan. She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. It was Jared. I froze. Jared? Her boss? The married one with the 2 kids and the family photo on his desk? I nearly choked on my own breath. What do you mean, met him? I mean, she whispered. He noticed how hard I was working. He pulled me into more meetings, asked me to help lead a pitch. Said he saw something in me, something leadership-worthy, and I wanted to believe it was real, that it was about my work. But it wasn't. No, she admitted, shaking her head. It wasn't. I took a step back, my foot slipping slightly on the edge of the stair. I felt dizzy. He asked me to stay after hours, she continued. It started with late-night strategy sessions, just us in the office. Then he started complimenting me, offering wine, asking about our marriage. Subtle things. Always subtle. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to hear this, but I needed to. Geneva clenched her jaw. One night he kissed me. I pulled away, told him it was wrong, but I didn't report him. I didn't even leave the project. I kept showing up. I acted like it didn't happen. I couldn't breathe. He backed off eventually, she went on. Found someone else. I saw the signs, same compliments, same behavior. She left 2 weeks later without saying goodbye. And that's when I realized I was never special to him. I was just next. I stared at her, stunned. And Logan? Logan's his replacement. Younger, flashier, less subtle, but same tactics. And I let it all happen again. Not the kiss, nothing physical, but the energy, the games, the validation. I needed it, and I hate myself for it. I sank into the armchair across from her. My legs didn't feel like they belonged to me anymore. The room seemed off-kilter. Everything she said rang true, and yet it felt like I was dreaming a version of my life where I had no control. You kept all of this from me, I said quietly. I didn't know how to tell you. You were grieving. You were pulling extra shifts. I thought I was handling it. But the truth is, I wasn't. We sat in silence for what felt like an hour. My hands were numb. My throat was dry. The betrayal didn't come from a hotel room or a secret phone. This betrayal came in the form of choices, compromises, emotional debts. Loyalty abandoned in favor of professional survival. Why are you telling me now? I finally asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Because when you walked out of that restaurant, I realized you were already gone. And if I didn't say it now, there'd be nothing left to explain. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell. But I just sat there, unraveling the timeline in my head. Geneva had been emotionally absent for months, and now I knew why. She'd been orbiting other men for so long. She didn't even realize she'd left home. I need space, I said at last. She nodded. I understand. I'll stay at Wesley's a few more days. She didn't argue. I stood up, walked to the door, and paused. One more thing, I said without turning back. Next time someone puts their hand on you at work, don't wait 6 months to tell me. Her reply came quiet, broken. There won't be a next time. I stepped outside into the cold air, heart pounding, hands shaking, wondering if that was a promise meant for me, or just another lie meant for herself. I didn't go back to Wesley's. Not immediately. I drove around town with no plan, just looping past the places I used to love and now couldn't stand. The diner where Geneva and I had our first date closed early for renovation. The bookstore she dragged me to every fall, gone, replaced with a sleek fitness studio. Even the old park where we used to walk on Sundays looked different, like someone had erased us from the scenery. Everywhere I turned felt hollow, stripped of warmth, like I'd overstayed my welcome in the life we'd built together. Around 6 p.m., I found myself parked outside her office building. I hadn't planned on going there. I really hadn't. But something about seeing it, slate beams sharp, smug signage gleaming above the doors like a crown on a too proud head, sent a jolt through my spine. I wasn't stalking. I wasn't there to confront anyone. I just needed to see it for myself. The arena where everything began falling apart. Through the glass walls, I could see rows of white desks, sterile lighting, a few silhouettes moving inside. Most of the staff had already gone home, but a few lingered. One of them was Dana, the same coworker who'd laughed in the group chat when someone said I needed therapy. She was at her desk, typing something furiously. I watched her for a moment, then opened the car door before I could talk myself out of it. The lobby was quiet. I walked up to the front desk and gave the receptionist a calm smile. Hi, I'm Callum Dawson, Geneva's husband. I think she left something in her drawer and asked me to grab it for her. It's not valuable, just her charger and her planner. The receptionist, a soft-faced woman named May with too much eyeliner and too little suspicion, nodded. Sure. You know her desk number? 14, I believe. She buzzed the side door open. I stepped into the office space like I was entering enemy territory. Geneva's desk was still the same. Minimal, obsessively tidy, a fake plant in the corner, her nameplate pushed slightly askew. I sat down in her chair, not really sure why. Her planner wasn't there. Her charger was. I stuffed it into my coat pocket. But then, without meaning to, I opened the top drawer. And that's when I saw the folder. It wasn't labeled. Just a black folder with a bent corner and a small sticky note that read, HR, confidential. I froze. Something told me to leave it alone. Something louder told me to open it. Inside were printed emails, all forwarded to HR, dozens. And they weren't about Geneva. They were from her. To HR. About Jared. About Logan. About comments, late-night meetings, a pattern of behavior she described in careful, legally aware language. But here's the twist. The complaints weren't recent. The first one was dated almost 10 months ago. She'd been reporting them, over and over, silently, without ever telling me. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. She described inappropriate boundary crossing, persistent flirtation despite rejection, and a workplace culture that ignores male favoritism and punishes female professionalism. There were screenshots, witness statements, even a memo from HR thanking her for her diligence and discretion. The final page, however, chilled me. It was a letter from Jared himself. Geneva, I'm disappointed by your decision to escalate these concerns. I thought we had a working relationship built on mutual trust. I hope this doesn't affect your standing with the team. J. It was signed, dated 2 weeks before she kissed me on the cheek and told me she had a late meeting. She hadn't been entertaining attention. She'd been enduring it. But that still didn't explain Logan. The group chats, the laughter at my expense, the public betrayal at dinner. So I flipped to the back of the folder, and that's when I saw it. A company policy memo. Bold, red ink across the top. Interpersonal conflicts with external spouses/partners. Mitigation procedures. What? I read it again. It was a clause. A literal clause in the employee handbook stating that when employee performance is perceived to be influenced by external relationship stressors, HR may recommend communication boundaries, including temporary distancing from non-employee spouses, to preserve professional focus. They'd turn me into a liability, a distraction. I wasn't just excluded from that dinner because of Geneva. Her company had encouraged it. This wasn't just her betrayal. It was institutional. I put everything back exactly how I found it and walked out in silence. But when I got to the parking lot, Dana, the coworker, was there, smoking behind a hedge. She jumped when she saw me. "Oh, you scared me." I looked at her. Really looked at her. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked quietly. She didn't pretend not to. She exhaled. She tried to play their game. HR told her to stay calm, stay quiet, don't make waves. She thought if she played by the rules, they'd listen. But this place only listens when they're forced to. And Logan? Dana hesitated, then looked away. Let's just say, he learned from Jared. I nodded once, then walked to my car. That night, I sat in silence on Wesley's porch, staring into nothing, letting it all settle in my chest like wet cement. My wife had been surrounded by men who saw her as an opportunity, and I had seen her as a traitor, not knowing she'd been fighting a battle I couldn't see. But I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. Because even if she'd been cornered, even if she was a victim of office politics and male egos, she still chose to humiliate me. She still made me the villain to protect her image. She let me walk out of that restaurant alone. And the next time we'd see each other, I wasn't walking in quietly. The day I walked back into Slate Beam wasn't random. It was timed, calculated. I spent 2 nights piecing it all together, connecting the dots, rereading that company policy over and over until I started to feel sick. Geneva wasn't just being sidelined. She was being systematically cornered. And I had let my ego make it about me. But I wasn't going there to make peace. I wasn't going there to scream either. I was going there for clarity, for accountability. For her, maybe, but also for me. Because the one thing no one seemed to expect from me was control. They all saw me as emotional, dramatic, insecure. It was time to remind them who they'd underestimated. I showed up at 10:03 a.m. on a Wednesday. Not early, not rushed, intentional. The receptionist, May, flinched slightly when she saw me again. I gave her a calm smile. "Hi, I have a meeting with Ms. Holloway from HR," I said, lifting a sealed envelope. I didn't, of course. But the moment you walk into a corporate office wearing a clean button-up, carrying documents, and speaking confidently, they don't ask questions. They assume you're someone important. She buzzed me in without blinking. I walked past the rows of desks, past the coffee machine with the tiny paper cups, past the bland motivational posters about synergy and teamwork. And then I saw her, Geneva. She was standing by the copier, talking to someone I didn't recognize. She looked thinner, paler, like she hadn't slept in days. The second her eyes met mine, her breath caught. She dropped a folder. Her colleague gave me a wary glance and stepped away. "Callum," she whispered. I didn't speak. I just handed her the envelope. "What's this?" she asked, voice cracking. "Read it later," I said. "But you'll want to be in the conference room in 5 minutes." Her eyes widened. "What are you doing?" What they didn't. I walked away before she could stop me. The main conference room was empty. I walked in, took the head seat, and waited. Geneva appeared first. Then came Dana, eyes flicking nervously toward me. Then Logan. Of course he came. Arrogant people can't resist a scene. He wore a smirk like it was part of the dress code. "You're not supposed to be here," Logan said, folding his arms. "I won't be long," I said calmly. "And I won't yell, but you're going to listen." Geneva looked like she wanted to run. I placed the envelope on the table and slid out the contents. Copies of Geneva's HR complaints, the policy memo, and Jared's letter. Dana's eyes widened. Logan's smirk faltered. "I found this in Geneva's drawer," I began. This is what she didn't tell me. What she was living through while I was busy thinking she was betraying me. I let the silence sit. "You want to know what betrayal looks like?" I continued. "It's a system that tells women to stay quiet or lose their jobs. It's coworkers who laugh at husbands behind their backs without understanding what that husband might be dealing with. It's men who use their positions to blur boundaries and pretend it's harmless." Logan scoffed. "Okay, what exactly do you want? You think this is some courtroom?" I want accountability, I said, locking eyes with him. I want everyone in this room to understand exactly what Geneva was pushed into. She's not blameless, but she's not the one who should be under a microscope. Then I turned to Dana. You saw it. You knew. And you stayed silent. Dana opened her mouth, then closed it. She had nothing. Geneva stared at the table, shame radiating from her in waves. I blamed her, I said, voice softer now. I walked out. I humiliated her in front of people who were already doing that behind closed doors. And I let you. I looked at Logan, convinced me that I was the problem. Logan sneered. No one made you react the way you did. That was all you. Maybe, I said. But your hands aren't clean either. And now HR has documentation of all of this. I've already sent it to an attorney. If they bury it, if they fire her quietly and pretend none of this happened, you'll see it online before your next quarterly meeting ends. Logan turned pale. I'm not here to win. I'm here to make sure no one forgets what she went through. And what I went through being dragged into it, blindsided, used as a scapegoat. The room was silent. Geneva finally looked up at me. Her eyes were red, but not with sadness, with clarity. I never expected you to do this, she whispered. Neither did I said. I stood, gathered the papers, and handed one copy to Dana, in case they lose the records again. Then I walked out. Not storming, not broken, just done. Outside, the wind had picked up. I stood in the parking lot, staring at the sky, waiting for something to hit me, a sense of victory, maybe. But all I felt was exhaustion. Like I'd just been through a battle where no one really won, but at least the battlefield was visible now. I didn't go back to Wesley's. I didn't go home either. I drove to the coast, to the cliffs where Geneva and I used to sit in silence during our better years. I parked, stepped out, and stared at the ocean for a long time. That's when my phone buzzed. One message. From Geneva. There's one more thing I never told you. If you're willing to hear it. I stared at the screen. Because somehow, after everything, I knew. This wasn't the end. I didn't answer her message right away. I sat with it for over an hour, just letting the sound of the waves do what words hadn't been able to, calm me. The sea had a way of making everything feel small, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself feel small without shame. Not like a loser, not like a man who'd been ignored or mocked or sidelined, but like a man who had been carrying too much for too long. And maybe, finally, I didn't have to anymore. When I finally texted back, I wrote 2 words. Come here. She showed up 2 hours later. She parked behind my car at the edge of the cliffs, her coat flapping in the wind, her hands buried deep in her pockets. No makeup, no curated expression. Just Geneva, stripped down, eyes raw but steady. She walked toward me slowly, like she was approaching a final exam she hadn't studied for. She didn't speak first. I did. You said there was one more thing. She nodded. There is. She stepped closer, stopping a few feet from me. When all of it started, Jared, Logan, the pressure, the panic, I didn't just start shutting you out because I was ashamed. I shut you out because I didn't think you'd believe me. Her voice cracked. You've always seen the best in people. You assumed the world runs on logic and fairness. I didn't want to drag you into something messy that might ruin how you saw me. Or worse, how you saw yourself. So I made myself smaller. I made you smaller too. I laughed at things I shouldn't have. I let them think you were the weak one because it protected me from being the fragile one. I said nothing. She stepped forward again. When you walked into that dinner, I was humiliated. Not because of what you said, because of what you saw. And I knew you wouldn't look at me the same again. I don't, I said quietly. She winced. But, I added, I think that's okay. She looked up. I don't see the same version of you I married. But maybe that version couldn't have survived everything you've gone through. Maybe this version, the one who filed reports quietly, who endured being laughed at, who kept showing up even when no one thanked her, that version is stronger. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I kept going. And maybe I'm not the man you married either. Maybe I never was. Maybe I've spent so long trying to be enough for you, I forgot that I already was. She stepped closer, close enough to touch. I never stopped loving you, Callum, she whispered. But I stopped believing you needed me. And I stopped believing I deserved you. For a moment, we just stood there. No rings. No promises. No answers. Just 2 people who'd seen each other at their worst, and still hadn't turned away. She reached for my hand. I let her. We sat on the hood of my car as the sun dipped behind the water, and we didn't talk about work or lawsuits, or HR policies, or coworkers who didn't matter anymore. We talked about books we never finished, about that road trip we always planned and never took, about whether we could still learn how to be on each other's side, not just out of habit, but out of choice. And as the stars came out one by one, Geneva laid her head on my shoulder and said the one thing I didn't know I still needed to hear. Let's start over. From here. From this exact spot. And I nodded, because after everything, the betrayal, the silence, the humiliation, the truth, we hadn't broken. We just cracked. And sometimes, cracked things let more light in.